Welcome back to Strange Minds 6. I'm your host, Ruby, and today we're going to be getting back into the book of Superstitions, a handbook of folklore, myths, and legends from around the world by D.R. McElroy. But before we begin, please grab a snack, grab a drink, or sit back and relax. And let's get to it, shall we? The Middle East. In modern times, the name may conjure notions of oil fields, fabulous wealth, and political unrest. Move back in time 100 years and the focus is on astounding, if controversial, discoveries of hidden tombs, lost cities, and civilizations whose achievements staggered the whole world. Egypt likely springs to mind first among these, ancient when the great dynasties of Asia were still young. Egypt controlled vast territories across the African continent. They were planners, builders, and artisans. They left behind huge mysterious constructions, statues and idols of gods and kings unknown. Most of what we know about those ancient folk has only been deciphered in the last century, millennia after that civilization went extinct. The countries of modern-day Iran, Iraq, Israel, and others have their own histories and stories to tell, and we all look at them too. Without going into a discussion about the politics involved in the use of the designation the Middle East, the term is thought by much of the world to refer to a collection of stories that share a common geographical location and sometimes a common mythological and heritage. The countries of the Middle East include Egypt, Lebanon, Palestine, Syria, and Jordan. Countries that were formerly referred to as the Levant, plus Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, and the Arabian Peninsula. As previously mentioned, the complete lack of commonality between the peoples of the Middle East and the nation of Israel, with its strong political and economic ties to the West, results in Israel typically being left off the list of countries considered to make up the Middle East, though much farther to the east geographically. Pakistan's politics qualify that country for inclusion in the Middle East concept. The first known recorded mythological story, and considered to be the oldest existing piece of literature remaining, is the Epic of Gilgamesh, written by ancient Sumerians around 2100 BCE and surviving in the form of cuneiform tablets. The story is in the form of an epic poem and it tells of the heroics and failings of the great Sumerian king Gilgamesh. Bilgamesh in Sumerian, who was said to have been 2/3 god and 1/3 human. Gilgamesh, excuse me, Gilgamesh was king of the city-state of Uruk in Sumer. The abbreviated version of his story has Bilgamesh undertaking a long journey after defying the gods and suffering the death of his best friend. The epic inspired the works of the Greek poet Homer, who used it as the model for his Odyssey, and Bilgamesh as the inspiration for the character of Odysseus. One of the most interesting parts of the original epic is its details concerning the Great Flood. Nearly all ancient and many modern cultures have a flood story, which typically features humanity somehow angering the gods or God and suffering the punishment of being wiped from the earth by flood waters. Some scientists theorize that this common mythology arises from the worldwide experience of glacial melting at the end of the last ice age. This idea led to the controversial theory of race memory, in which the traumatic experience of the floods was passed down genetically from one generation to the other to the next millennia. Another important contribution to ancient Middle Eastern literature was made by a woman, specifically a woman named Enhiduna. I apologize if I got that name wrong. Who is considered to be the oldest known author to be referred to by name, while the Epic of Bilgamesh was written by persons unknown. Enhiduna is credited with a number of works of epic poetry. She lived in about 2200 BCE in the kingdom of Sumer, where she was a high priestess. She was the daughter of the Akkadian king Sargon the Great, himself the son of a priestess, and Queen Tashlutum. Under Sargon, Akkad would conquer and absorb a great number of Sumerian city-states, including Bilgamesh's Uruk, known by Sargon's time as Ur. Enhidona was so important a figure in the literary world of the time that she was tasked with reconciling the pantheon of Sumerian gods with that of the Akkadians in order to encourage the conquered Sumerian cities to accept Akkadian rule. She succeeded spectacularly at this task and was given responsibility for managing the temple of Sumeria. She established conventions and writing poetry that would survive to profoundly influence the writing of the Hebrew Bible, as well as many poems and hymns of ancient Greece. She was eventually buried in the ziggurat of Ur. Egypt. Perhaps no civilization exemplifies the wide range of unusual and curious mythology more than Egypt. While modern Egypt is mostly Muslim, the huge pantheon of gods and goddesses in ancient civilization of Egypt, nearly all of which combine animal and human features, a convention known as Theranif- Therianthropho. I know I'm gonna get this wrong. I'm sorry, guys. Therianthropic depiction demonstrates a rich and versatile range of deities for all occasions. Egyptians, gods, Egyptian gods and goddesses. The following is a list of the most popular Egyptian gods and goddesses. Anat. Anat was the goddess of war, consort of Set. She was imported from Canaanite mythology, where she had been known as Anath. She seems to have fared better as an Egyptian goddess than as a Canaanite one. See her listing as Anath in the Middle Eastern Gods and Goddesses section. Anubis. I like Anubis. he's really cool. Anubis, undoubtedly the Egyptian god most familiar to Western civilization. Anubis was the jackal-headed god of the dead. His role was to guide the deceased to the underworld, where their souls, which resided in their hearts, would be weighed by Osiris, king of the underworld. Bast, or Bastet. Bast is a protective goddess, usually depicted as a cat with earrings, or as a woman with the head of a cat. When the Greek civilization came in contact with the Egyptians, the Greeks adapted some of the Egyptian deities to their own pantheon. Bast became known as Aluros to the Greeks, which is the source of the word allurophile, meaning cat lover. Bes. This god is usually depicted as a dwarf sticking out his tongue and facing front instead of to the side, as most Egyptian deities are shown. Bes was said to confer protection in childbirth and improve fertility. He also guarded against snakes, which seems curious since the cobra is one of the symbols of royalty in ancient Egypt. Hathor. Hathor, a highly prominent goddess. Hathor is the protector of women in childbirth and incarnation of the Milky Way on Earth. Hathor is frequently depicted as a hippopotamus or sometimes a cow. She was the wife of the sun god Ra and mother of the pharaonic god Horus. Horus, Heru, Hor. Perhaps the most highly revered god in ancient Egypt, Horus was the protector of pharaohs and a role model for young males, as well as king of the black, rich soil region of Egypt. Horus is always depicted as a man with the head of a falcon, a bird sacred to pharaohs. Horus had a number of different aspects, including Horus the Avenger, Horus Lord of the Two Lands, and Horus Behudedi. Isis, the greatest goddess in the Egyptian pantheon. Isis was the sister wife of Osiris and daughter of Geb and Nut. Isis had influence over many aspects of Egyptian life, including beer, wind, abundance, the heavens, and magic. She is credited with bringing Osiris back from the dead and subsequently giving birth to Horus, the protector of pharaohs. Isis is typically depicted as a beautiful woman wearing a sun disk headdress. Neith, Nit, Net, Niet, one of the oldest Egyptian goddesses. Neth predates the period of the great dynasties of Egypt before 5000 BCE, usually depicted as a weaver of cloth, especially the bandages used to wrap mummies. Neith became associated with the goddess Athena of the Greeks. She is sometimes shown wearing the red crown of Lower Egypt. Neith is one of the few gods not associated with an animal. Osiris. Osiris was the king of the underworld, father of Horus. He is usually depicted as a pharaoh wearing a crown and the horns of a ram, carrying a crook and flail, the scepters of pharaohs, and having the lower half of his body wrapped in the bandages of a mummy. Often his skin is green. Ra. Ra was the sun god and the god of everything. He was a mentor to Horus, and he is typically depicted as a man with a sun disk on his head, or sometimes as a man with the head of a falcon, which may cause him to be confused with Horus. Set, Seti, Seth. Set was the god of chaos and brother, or murderer, of Osiris. Set was king of the Red Desert region of Egypt and the agent of fierce storms. He is usually depicted as various composite animals, especially as a man with the head of an unknown creature, perhaps now extinct, that is called the Set animal or the Typhonic beast. It resembles an aardvark with floppy donkey ears. Egyptian mythical monsters. Ooh, that sounds really cool. But we're gonna leave it off here. And in the next video, we will talk about the Egyptian mythical monsters and what they compose of, their names, how they are depicted, and if they stand for anything in particular. But this, my dear friends, is Ruby, signing off. May you have a good morning, noon, or night, whenever this video reaches you. Goodbye.